Isaac's parents had got him a phone on his birthday when he turned 10. The phone became their shared treasure, a source of endless amusement during quiet afternoons. Isaac and Jessica had never needed much to occupy their time. The compound they lived in was small, with walls that hummed with the sounds of daily life, children laughing, women chattering, the occasional clink of metal. But when their mothers left for the market, leaving them alone in the house, it was as if the world outside ceased to exist. Isaac's room, the smaller of the two, was their sanctuary. The cluttered bed with mismatched blankets, the half-empty bookshelf, the small desk with a few pencils and a notebook, everything in it was familiar. And then there was the phone. A relic of the modern world, and a symbol of the endless possibilities that existed within their small, quiet home. They didn't need anything else. The phone opened up a world of games, videos, and stories. One afternoon, when the sunlight slanted at just the right angle, creating long shadows on the floor, Isaac sat cross-legged on his bed. He was tapping away on the phone, flicking through screens, his fingers moving with the ease of a child who had spent years with the device. Jessica sat beside him, her knees pulled to her chest, peering over his shoulder. They were both quiet, as if the world outside had vanished completely. Isaac's mother had always warned him about the importance of balance: play outside, spend time with the other children, don't get too lost in the screen. But that afternoon, the phone was too tempting. He could hear the laughter of the others outside, but it felt far away, irrelevant. The world on the screen was a much more interesting place. "What should we do today?" Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. Isaac didn't reply immediately. He was too absorbed in scrolling through the apps, glancing at the notifications that pinged across the screen. His thumb hovered over an app he rarely used, one that was filled with countless videos. He had never paid much attention to it before. The thumbnails were garish, bright, filled with bold images and exaggerated expressions. Some were unsettling, almost as if the faces on the screen were too much to look at for too long. But today, his curiosity tugged at him. "Let's see what's in here," Isaac muttered, more to himself than to Jessica. His finger tapped on the app, and it opened to a world of strange clips. There were faces of people shouting, dramatic scenes unfolding, images that made no sense at all. "What is this?" Jessica whispered, leaning closer. Isaac raised his eyebrows and grinned. "I don't know, but it looks fun." He scrolled down further, watching as strange thumbnails filled the screen. It wasn't the kind of video they typically watched, not the funny animal videos or the cartoon clips. These were different, more adult, with emotions they couldn't fully understand. One video caught his eye, a thumbnail that seemed to jump out at him. It was bright and bold, with people shouting at each other, their faces full of tension. "What's that?" Jessica asked again, her eyes wide. She was leaning in, curious but also cautious. Isaac shrugged, glancing at the thumbnail again. "I don't know. Let's see what happens." Before Jessica could say anything, Isaac pressed play. The screen lit up, and the video began. At first, the two children were quiet, watching the strange characters on the screen. There was something mesmerizing about it. Their movements were dramatic, the way they looked at each other almost like they were angry, but the language they spoke was foreign. It didn't make sense, but it seemed important. It seemed dramatic. Isaac looked over at Jessica, who was watching intently, her expression serious. "What are they doing?" she asked softly, her voice full of confusion. "I don't know," Isaac replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it looks like they're arguing." The characters on the screen spoke in low, urgent tones. Their words were unintelligible to the children, but the way they moved, their faces full of emotion, seemed to convey a message. The children sat in silence, the only sound in the room coming from the phone. It was almost as if the world outside had disappeared, leaving only the strange drama unfolding on the small screen in Isaac's hands. As the video played, the children's fascination grew. They were too young to understand what was really happening, but there was something forbidden about it. Something that made their hearts race, something that made them feel like they were looking at something they shouldn't. And yet, they couldn't look away. "I don't get it," Jessica whispered, her voice thick with confusion. "Why are they fighting? What are they saying?" Isaac shook his head, not sure what to make of it either. "I don't know, Jess. But it's interesting." The two of them sat there, cross-legged on Isaac's bed, the phone between them, absorbed in the strange world unfolding on the screen. Time seemed to slip away. They didn't notice the heat of the afternoon sun growing more intense, or the hours passing without a word spoken. They were entranced, caught in the pool of the video, unable to look away, even as questions swirled in their minds. Then, suddenly, a loud creak of the compound gate opening shattered the stillness of the room. The children froze. The familiar sound of their mother's footsteps echoed through the compound. They knew they would be back soon, but they hadn't expected to be caught in the act. Panic set in as the footsteps grew louder. "They're coming," Jessica gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" Isaac's heart raced in his chest as he grabbed the phone, trying to close the video as quickly as possible. But his hands were trembling, and in his panic, he accidentally turned the volume up. The loud voices from the video blared through the room, sending a jolt of panic through both of them. "Turn it off," Jessica hissed, her voice frantic. "They'll hear us." "I'm trying," Isaac whispered urgently, his hands shaking as he scrambled to close the app. The footsteps outside grew louder. They could hear the voices of their mothers approaching. Isaac's thumb fumbled across the screen, trying desperately to turn off the video. His mind raced. What would happen if they were caught? With a final swipe, Isaac managed to turn the video off, but the damage was done. The phone slipped from his hands and fell under the pillow, where it was hidden from view. The footsteps outside were now right outside Isaac's room. The children sat in silence, holding their breath, waiting for their mothers to pass by. The sound of the key turning in the door was like a jolt of electricity. Isaac and Jessica sat frozen, their eyes wide with fear. But after a long moment, they heard the sound of their mothers moving away, their voices growing fainter. "They're gone," Isaac breathed a sigh of relief. Jessica looked at him, wide-eyed. "That was too close." Isaac nodded, his heart still pounding in his chest. He felt a strange mix of relief and unease. They had escaped the immediate danger, but something about what they had watched felt wrong. He wasn't sure why. They didn't understand what they had seen, but the emotions it stirred in them were undeniable. "We shouldn't do that again," Isaac said softly, his voice serious. Jessica nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "Yeah. I think we should just stick to playing outside tomorrow." This was too weird. Isaac agreed, and for the first time since they'd started watching the video, a feeling of unease settled over him. He didn't know why, but something about it didn't sit right. He had been curious, and Jessica had been curious too. But now, in the quiet of his room, he realized they had wandered into a space they weren't ready for. After that afternoon, Isaac and Jessica didn't speak much about the video. They had pushed it to the back of their minds, choosing instead to enjoy their usual games. Isaac went back to his favorite pastime of drawing on his small notepad, sketching superheroes with exaggerated muscles and capes, while Jessica spent her time outside, playing with the other children in the compound. But in the quiet moments, when they were alone again, the memory of the video lingered like an unspoken question hanging between them. Isaac couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't that the video had made sense, it hadn't. But there had been something in the way the characters spoke to each other, their voices rising and falling with such emotion, that made him want to know more. Felt as though there was a whole world out there in those videos, a world that he and Jessica had only just begun to glimpse. Jessica, too, had found herself thinking about it. The confusion had stayed with her, but so had the intrigue. She wasn't sure what exactly had drawn her to the video, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important in it. Something they needed to understand. One evening, when the sky was painted with the soft colors of dusk, Isaac found himself sitting alone on his bed, the phone in his hands again. The house was quiet, the only sound being the faint rustling of leaves outside the window. His heart raced as he stared at the phone. Was it a mistake to open that app again? They hadn't really understood what they were watching before, but they could try again, couldn't they? He couldn't resist. With a deep breath, Isaac opened the app again, his eyes scanning the thumbnails. They were just as garish as before, but something about them pulled at him. He tapped on one. The video began. This time, Isaac knew better than to turn up the volume too high. He kept it at a low murmur, his eyes glued to the screen. The video seemed similar to the one they had watched before, but there were new faces, new characters. They were speaking in the same low, urgent tones. Isaac couldn't follow what they were saying, but the emotions in their voices were undeniable. There was tension, a sense of urgency, like something important was at stake. He turned his head slightly and saw Jessica standing in the doorway of his room, watching him quietly. Her expression was unreadable. He hadn't heard her coming. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Isaac jumped, startled by her sudden presence. He quickly grabbed the phone and turned it off, but it was too late. Jessica had already seen enough to know what he had been doing. "I thought we weren't going to do this again," she said, her voice softer than before, but there was an edge to it. Isaac sighed and rubbed his neck. "I don't know why I'm doing it. It's just so strange. But I can't stop wondering about it." Jessica walked over and sat down on the bed beside him, her hands folded in her lap. "I've been thinking about it too. I mean, why do they talk like that? It's like they're really mad at each other. But they don't even make sense." Isaac nodded, his brow furrowed. "Yeah. It's like they're fighting, but for no reason." Jessica stared at the phone, still lying on the bed. "Do you think it's okay to watch it? I mean, it feels kind of wrong." Isaac took a deep breath. "Yeah, it does feel wrong. But it's kind of exciting too. It's like we are seeing something we are not supposed to." Jessica hesitated for a moment, then looked at Isaac with a serious expression. "Maybe that's why we shouldn't watch it. We are not supposed to understand it. Maybe it's for adults or something." Isaac sat back against the bed frame, thinking. "You're probably right. But why would they put it there, in the app, if it wasn't meant for us to see?" Jessica shook her head. "Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe we are not supposed to find it at all." Isaac considered this, his fingers tracing the edges of the phone. "You think we should stop looking at it?" She nodded, her expression firm. "Yeah. I think we should just forget about it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was quiet again, save for the faint sound of their mothers talking outside. The weight of their decision hung in the air between them, and it felt like an important moment. Isaac finally broke the silence. "You're right. Let's leave it. We don't need to know what's in those videos." Jessica smiled and stood up. "Good. Let's go outside and play." Isaac followed her, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The temptation of the phone had been strong, but now that they had made a decision together, he felt better. They didn't need to know everything. There were plenty of things in the world they didn't understand, and that was okay. Isaac and Jessica didn't return to the app again, though the temptation remained in the back of their minds. They returned to their usual routines, playing outside, chatting with the other children, and laughing together. But their curiosity had not vanished entirely. The question of what was in those videos lingered like a shadow, something they couldn't quite escape. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon and their mothers returned home from the market, Jessica's mother, Amina, sat down with the children in the living room. Her face was calm, but there was a sharpness to her gaze. "Amina, is everything all right?" Isaac's mother, Sarah, asked, noticing the serious look on her friend's face. Amina looked over at Jessica and Isaac, her expression softening. "There's something I need to discuss with you," she said, turning her attention back to the children. "Have you noticed that they've been spending more time on that phone lately?" Isaac's mother looked at him and then at Jessica. "I thought they were just playing games." Amina shook her head. "It's more than just games. I've seen them scrolling through apps, looking at things they shouldn't be. I'm worried about what they might be exposed to." The room grew silent. Isaac and Jessica exchanged quick glances, unsure of how to respond. They hadn't told their mothers about the video, about their exploration into the app. But now, with Amina's words hanging in the air, they both felt a sense of guilt. "I've been thinking about it too," Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm. "I've noticed Isaac has been quieter lately, more distracted. And I've caught him on the phone at odd times, when he should be playing outside or doing something else." Isaac felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't meant for it to get to this point. He hadn't realized that his curiosity had begun to affect his behavior. "Isaac, Jessica," Amina continued, her voice gentle but serious. "You know that there are some things in this world that aren't meant for you to see right now. Things that can confuse you, make you feel uneasy. That's why we have to be careful. You need to trust us when we say some things are just not for children." Isaac felt a surge of emotion. The weight of his actions, of sneaking around, of looking at things he wasn't ready to understand, hit him all at once. He had wanted to be curious, but now he realized that some questions were better left unanswered. "We are sorry," Isaac said quietly, looking down at his hands. Jessica nodded in agreement. "We didn't mean to make things difficult." Amina smiled warmly at them. "It's not about making things difficult, dear. It's about keeping you safe. You need to remember that the world is big and sometimes things are not as they seem. Not everything on that phone is meant for you." Isaac and Jessica sat in silence, absorbing the lesson. Their mothers had always cared for them, but now they understood in a deeper way why those boundaries existed. It wasn't about control, it was about protection. In the days that followed, Isaac and Jessica felt a weight lift from their shoulders. The phone, once a mysterious object full of endless possibilities, now seemed less fascinating. The desire to explore the unknown had faded, replaced by a newfound respect for the boundaries set by their mothers. They spent more time outside, laughing with the other children and enjoying the simplicity of playing games in the fresh air. However, despite the clarity of the lesson they had learned, there was still something lingering in the back of Isaac's mind. The truth was, he felt a little embarrassed. He had acted on curiosity without thinking of the consequences, and now he realized that there was much more to the world than what he had glimpsed on that phone. Isaac couldn't help but wonder, what other things had he missed in his desire to know everything at once? Jessica, too, had changed. She was quieter now, more thoughtful. She had a new appreciation for the world around her, for the things that were meant to be enjoyed without rushing to understand them. She understood that some things were beyond her years, things that were meant for adults to figure out. It made her feel safer somehow, knowing that her mother and Isaac's mother were looking out for her, even when it was hard to see why certain things needed to be off limits. But then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened that would test their resolve.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can bring you more amazing stories.